Hello everyone! It's time for my first proper movie review of 2018, and for this occasion I've decided to go with a little movie I'm quite fond of, something that I talked about reviewing last year, Mad Love. This 1935 horror film stars Peter Lorre as Dr. Gogol, a brilliant surgeon infatuated with Yvonne, the star of a House of Horrors theater. But Yvonne, played by Frances Drake, is very much in love with her concert pianist husband, Stephen Orlock, played by Colin Clive, and firmly rejects Gogol's advances. But when Stephen's hands are destroyed in a train wreck, Yvonne pleads for the doctor's assistance. Unable to work a miracle, Gogol instead tries a hand transplant, giving Stephen the hands of a recently executed murderer. The operation is successful, but Stephen's hands now seem to have a life of their own, with an affinity not for playing the piano, but for throwing knives at people. Based on the 1920 French novel Les Mains d'Orlock by Maurice Renard, this story has been adapted for the screen several times. This film and the 1924 German silent film Hands of Orlock, or Orlock's Hände, starring Conrad Veidt as the pianist, are the most well-known adaptations, though they differ in their treatment of the story. Mad Love focuses more on the doctor than on the pianist, and introduces the unrequited love plot as a major catalyst, which obviously alters the direction of the story. By the way, this movie has nothing really to do with The Beast with Five Fingers, the 40s horror film, which I talked about briefly in one of last year's What Else I Saw videos. That movie does feature Peter Lorre and a killer hand, and how many people get to say they've been in two movies with killer hands, but I think it's just one of those crazy coincidences. Peter Lorre had already experienced international success with his Chilling role, considered by many to be his best performance as a child killer in the 1931 German thriller M. Mad Love was Lorre's first American film. Well, technically Crime and Punishment was the first, but Mad Love was released sooner, and again he goes all out in a noteworthy performance as Dr. Gogol. Dr. Gogol is a very strange man, extremely jealous and insecure, a scientific genius, but hard to warm up to. There's a bizarre dichotomy between the clinical Gogol, the gentle, soft-spoken doctor who's kind to children and doesn't charge for charity cases, versus the twisted, lovesick madman with the dead-eyed stare who quotes poetry in an unsettling, monotonous voice. Gogol's madness is tricky because while he has a definite breaking point from which there is no return, he's actually kind of insane the whole time. He's just pretty good at hiding it. But the signs are there in his impulsivity, his detachment from society, his fascination with Yvette's stage performance in which she plays a woman screaming in terror as her sadistic husband tortures her on a medieval breaking wheel, and his macabre interest in the convicted murderer's beheading. I'll be honest and acknowledge the fact that maybe one reason why I like this movie so much is that it has certain things in common with The Phantom of the Opera, largely because they're both about an eccentric genius obsessed with a beautiful woman of the theater who finds his romantic advances repulsive. Both Gogol and The Phantom, as long as we're talking Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, keep a life-size replica of the woman they love in their home, and Gogol even plays the organ! And by the way, I love Peter Lorre's eyebrow game in this movie. Lorre always acted with his face, using his eyes and eyebrows especially to convey a certain pathetic quality, but the single arched brow is used a lot here to great effect, and further accentuated by his shaved head. As for the rest of the cast, they do a fine job. Frances Drake's moments of hysteria can be a little over the top, but that's a minor point, and that's kind of how hysteria goes, and she does very well in her uncomfortable interactions with Gogol. She also does a great job pretending to be made of wax. I know that sounds like a backhanded compliment, oh she was great at standing still and not saying anything, but I mean it. The close-ups of the wax figure are actually her in makeup, and it's very convincing. And in the final tense sequence, when Yvonne has to face raving lunatic Gogol and make him think she's the wax figure, despite the fact that she's panicking on the inside, it's an impressive moment to me. Colin Clive also succeeds, once again playing the nice man tortured with doubts of his own sanity and driven into desperate action. One really can't help drawing the comparisons to his Dr. Henry Frankenstein, a role which he reprised that same year in James Whale's Bride of Frankenstein. Even though he's not the one playing the mad scientist here, he's the victim, the close-up shots of his scarred and stitched-up hands call Frankenstein imagery to mind. And it's no wonder. Mad Love has much in common with other horror films of the 30s, with its dramatically spacious set design, stylish costuming, deranged hallucination sequences, and creative emphases on shadows and framing. The screenplay features the writing talent of John Balderston, who worked on all the major Universal monster films of the decade, though I should clarify, Mad Love is an MGM film. It was directed by famous cinematographer Karl Freund, who photographed such noteworthy films as Metropolis and Dracula, and also directed The Mummy. And the cinematographer was Greg Toland, famous for his work on Citizen Kane, which some film critics argue drew inspiration from Mad Love. Like James Whale's films in particular, Mad Love sports a quirky blend of horror and dark comedy. The supporting cast includes a couple of comical characters, Dr. Gogol's alcoholic Cockney housekeeper who's resentful of another woman's presence in the house, even if the other woman is made of wax, and the squeamish American reporter who's sent to dig up gruesome stories for his paper. Unlike certain random outbreaks of comedy in other films, I don't find the comic moments these two generate to be out of place. They fit in with the plot, and their scenes don't go on too long. All that being said, this isn't a perfect movie. Like so many old horror films, the ending is absurdly abrupt, with a dizzying resolution, a happy music cue, and ta-da! That's the end! I also have a lot of difficulty accepting that neither Stephen nor Yvonne, after a decent recovery period, realized that those weren't his own hands. Hands and fingers vary so much in shape, size, skin pigment, texture, etc., and I can't imagine the murderer's hands were so similar to Stephen's that the Orlocks don't notice a difference. But maybe I'm underestimating the traumatic effect the wreck and then the surgery would take, and how that might change the hands and even affect their memory of what the hands looked like before. As a fan of this movie, I was surprised to learn that in 1935, Mad Love was a box office failure and earned some harsh criticism. And though I don't believe it's any more graphic or violent than other movies of the era, it pushed the envelope too far for some, even after they'd removed 15 minutes of footage. However, it has gained popularity and acclaim in recent years, and speaking for myself, I find it enjoyably ghoulish. I like the story, the quick pace and the style, the lead performances, especially Peter Lorre's, and the build-up to this awesome, freaky moment, which I'm not going to explain because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. If you want to know what on earth this is all about, I recommend you watch the movie. So that's Mad Love. It's not as big or as well known as some other horror movies of the 1930s, but it's one of my favorites of the decade, so I'm glad I was able to share my thoughts on it with you. If anyone else out there is a fan of it, go ahead and let me know, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching!